His throne was a blaze of flames. Its wheels were a burning fire. A stream of fire poured out, issuing from his presence. 1,000,000 waited on him. 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. It has been given to some mystics to have the veil lifted for a short while and to see angels. It would seem that there is a great concentration of angels there where the holy sacrifice is offered. That would also explain why in our own apparition in Knock the angels are around. Indeed, they're the only moving part of that apparition, and they do not stop moving for 2 hours. And the center of attention is the slain lamb. With regard to this invisible presence, it's something that on this day we want to pause over. We can go through life making abstraction of the fact that we are surrounded just because we cannot see them. And yet we are sometimes made aware of their intervention. Have you ever been involved in what at the moment seemed to be an inevitable bad accident with probable disastrous consequences, and yet it didn't quite happen? Well, it's probable that your guardian angel was working overtime at that point. There are, by now, quite a few captured testimonies of such things going on. One of the advantages of modern technology is that closed-circuit television can actually, just by chance, capture things which can then, because they're in digital form, go around the world pretty niftily. You know what I mean. And if one is that way inclined, one can see, yes, a few angels intervening. And I'm talking about genuine scientific fact which is not fabricable. It's either there or it's not there, and it's there, so it happened. And to cite one amongst many, typical one, it's this. There is a case in the States somewhere of a gentleman who was riding one of those old bikes that they used to have to sell ice cream on, or something of that nature. It's more than an ordinary bike, it has things on it. And he is heading, as one sees from this camera, which is just functioning, into inevitable disaster and death. He can't see it, but he's heading for a collision on a crossroads. And then, out of nowhere, comes, at a colossal speed, just supernatural speed, because they have to slow it down eventually to show what's going on, this being, which has the appearance of a human being, but light, and intercepts this disaster, and going outside the laws of time, because there's no time available, because of the speed involved, removes this good gentleman out of the front of this high-speed heavy lorry. And one sees him a bit shaken on the side of this highway, not knowing what hit him, that is, didn't hit him. There are many others captured in the same way. We have, in several instances, various saints who have received Holy Communion without a priest being present. An angel. But they have to, and this was asked, they have to get it from a tabernacle, and that was explained to them. The angel can only receive what the priest has consecrated. Indeed, the difference between Garabandal and Fatima is that Garabandal is in the beginning of the epoch of modern technology, just about, and by chance, and it is by chance, we have a filming of a miracle of that nature taking place. Conchita opens her mouth and waits, and we see the host appearing from nowhere. It came from a tabernacle, but an angel brought it. Now, although Garabandal is still in suspense, just be aware that it has reversed since the 60s and 70s, because the local bishops, the last two, have become favourable and very favourable. The change happened some years ago when the main influence himself changed. It was a psychiatrist, whatever he was, an expert anyway, who analysed the whole thing and decided against it, and that influenced everyone else. He came out in public and reversed his decision, and that was the beginning also of the general reversal. All that in parenthesis, just to be aware that Garabandal is back on track as regards seriousness. You can't anymore just push it aside. But St. Michael is there. St. Michael, of whom we think on this day, is very much to the fore at Garabandal, as he was actually in Fatima. The angels are where our Blessed Lady is, and a fortiori where her Divine Son is. And what do we learn already from Garabandal and these angels? Indirectly, we learn this. If one looks at their movements, also filmed, backwards, up hills at high speed, and so on and so forth, if one also is careful to see what's going on, one is informed that every time they came into the presence of the Blessed Sacrament, something happened. They were physically impeded from turning their back on the tabernacle, and therefore they walk backwards every time they leave the church. And that, by the way, I still keep out of instinct, because we were told that in formation in Italy. Our house was very liturgical, and we were told we were not to turn our back on the Blessed Sacrament. And by the way, if you're celebrating in the old position of not this way but the other way, you have a certain point at which you have to turn round to the people. Twice. Once when you say, "Pray, brethren," and the other time is when you say, "Behold the Lamb of God." So when you're celebrating that way, you're not allowed to turn your back on the host, so you have to step to one side. That's part of the reason why, after the council, the priests who'd been formed that way had the instinct to put the tabernacle on one side. That's just another parenthesis. But anyway, the people, notably nuns, who have adoration day and night, are always exposed to the Blessed Sacrament, and they too would have had that instinct that one did not turn one's back on the Blessed Sacrament, especially exposed. Backward movements. So, that was a miracle which was an education for the Church. Physicity enters into it. The angels have the gift of what we call agility. A thought travels without travelling. So does an angel. The inspiration to go comes, and zoom, they're there, without covering, in our way, the mileage. They can just get there. They can also go through things. There is a question as to how much they know. Now, we were taught that the demon, being an angel, fallen, has retained his faculties on those issues, and therefore he knows what he would know as an unfallen angel. And we were told, this in the realm of sin and confession and whatnot, that the demon directly does not actually know the thoughts. But there may be some knowledge of imagination and visual thoughts, and he can actually meddle with them. What the demon does is that he has a perfect knowledge of consequences and likelihoods. Therefore, he knows that this will lead to that, and that's how he works. He is able to preempt and strike in advance in a way that will work. By the way, as the angels of whom we think on this day are perfectly orchestrated, 3 layers, 3 times each, you know what they are? Well, so too, and this has come out of exorcism, the demonic forces are perfectly orchestrated in reverse. One day, there was a powerful exorcism taking place, and the exorcist was having a job. And this is all on tape. Again, modern gadgets catching things, and catching, therefore, demonic noises and words. And we hear this conversation at one point. Who are you in there? We want to know the names of these demons. And this awful noise comes out. Beelzebub! That means Lord of the Flies, Beelzebub. And the exorcist is puzzled. He thought that it was the top man because it was such an awful case. Why isn't it Lucifer? And he's given to understand they were there by order of Lucifer. So the exorcist carries on. Does that mean that you are in command and commanded as we are? And the demon replies, there's a perfect order! And he goes on, it's far more perfect than what you know. What does that tell us? It means they're working overtime, and they're perfectly obedient to the top brain, Lucifer, who was, remember, the most brilliant of them all, and therefore the most brilliant of all creatures, because creature is creatus, created. He wasn't there from all eternity. God made at one point the angelic court. Therefore he was no longer alone from that point onwards in time. But he didn't want robots, and so he didn't want them to have the fullness of vision and beatific ecstasy until they had somehow had their bit of collaboration. They were given a test. The theologians believed that they were shown the incarnation, and therefore something appearing less in majesty than themselves, and we have this non serviam, I will not serve. It's instant, and because of the angelic perfection of knowledge, it's irreversible. And so, what did not exist until then comes into existence. Now, we don't know actually how that happened. If one notices, again from modern science, that the closer one gets to the depth of one part of the universe that we know, I mean the Earth, one finds a great heat. And one finds also, coming out of there, if one drills and drills and drills right into the depths of the ocean, and at the shortest point, there's only 1 mile between the seabed and the deepest part of the ocean and where it's liquid. So, only a mile. And if one drills at that deep point, things start to happen. Creatures come out of there that are not known and do strange things, eating into iron and all kinds of things, and they have a hideous look. So this again is all caught on modern means. You can go into YouTube yourself if you're that way inclined. You just have to go into BP boring into the Pacific, into the Gulf of Mexico, I believe, and you've got them all visible. So this is a little parenthesis that hell did not exist in eternity, but there was a point in which there had to be a place for these henceforth rebellious forces. There had been a first no in the universe. The universe at that point was no longer in perfect harmony. There had to be, therefore, some of these to go. And we think that probably what actually happened was this. Lucifer, because he was so bright, had something which would then be our own temptation in Adam, and our own too, in some way to be self-sufficient and to own our gifts. Pride. At that point, he thought he would actually be head of his own kingdom. Because God, being so infinitely good, he couldn't possibly do anything to stop it. He couldn't possibly have any kind of unpleasantness. He was goodness itself. Bonum est diffusum sui. Goodness is diffuse of itself, giving itself off all the time, generous, creating. At that point came into being the greatest shock even for the demons. And this battle took place in which St. Michael was not the most brilliant, was made the most brilliant, and given extra power, and were given to understand from Scripture itself there was huge cosmic battle way before we got on track, in which something was going on because Lucifer was trying to get them all into rebellion and have really his own kingdom. He got 1/3. That's a huge number. People ask how many angels there are, and people actually answer an infinite number. It's probably more than possibly imagine. So, at that point, something comes into being where these have to be away from the light as far as possible. And at that point, hell comes into existence. Now, I don't know, I'm putting it out to you. We don't know how these spirits work as regards geography, but if it is true that down in the heart of the earth there is awful heat, smell, crying, ugliness, darkness as well, is it possible? Is it possible, big question mark, that that's actually what happened? That even our earth, I don't know, started to be also in that context. We haven't a clue. If there was a big bang at that point and so on, this is all beyond history. We don't know. But it's not just something abstract and mythical. These spirits, good and bad, move around. They're in places as well. Although the theologians tell you when an angel is not in ministry, because his word angel, the name, means announcer, angelos, when he's actually announcing, the experts tell you, ubi est angel, where is an angel when he's not ministering? And the answer is nullibi, nowhere. It's outside place. We don't quite understand how it works. But the demons are around. And how many of you have had that notion there's demonic stuff here in a nasty place, a house? I was just talking actually only yesterday to a person who some years ago had visited Auschwitz. He's a very sensitive soul, this person. I know him very well. And as soon as he got close to a certain part of Auschwitz, he started to smell an awful, awful odour. And he asked the person next to him, actually two ladies in the group, do you smell a terrible thing? No, not particularly, not particularly. And then he couldn't actually go in there. He was somehow made aware there was something awfully, awfully dark there where these gas cylinders had been put down and where by the 100 these Jews were being obliterated. And the worst atrocities of humankind were in that small acreage. And somehow he was made aware of it. It wasn't just human. And there was something in the air. And actually, nature knows it. Do you know that no birds fly over Auschwitz? That's interesting. The animals somehow sense our goodness and our badness. A farmer will tell you something about that. They somehow sense things too. Angels are not animals. They're superiors to us in some ways, and yet they can't do what we can do. They can't be ordained, and they can't suffer. We have a ministry of suffering while we're on earth, and we can gain merit in this game. What we forget is that as long as we're in time, we're at risk, because an angel will not be lost now. We can be, as long as we're on this side of eternity. And I was told this by a holy nun who seemed to have gifts. She's completely enclosed. And she was saying to me to be vigilant. The devil doesn't sleep. He's attacking when you're not on guard, and he likes to attack particularly the consecrated. He can get in when we are off guard, e.g. when we're in front of a screen. And by the way, because I see there are a few little people out there, I noticed that just coming back from seeing Mam the other day on the boat from Wales, I just happened to look at the monitor now and again, and I could see that what was innocent when we were children, cartoons, Walt Disney, is not just innocent now. There were things coming in there, little almost teddy bear-like demons, but they became demons at times with horns and black looks, and vampires and things were here and there. I thought, is this some kind of little chink whereby old Nick is able to get at the innocent and suggest that good is not good and evil is good? Is it some kind of ploy? But for the adults too, you can't just put on the goggle box live and sit there. If you do, you're responsible for the inevitable consequences in the hour or two ahead. You can watch carefully selected documentaries if you program what you want, or a DVD, but live television eventually is going to put you in front of demonic influences, at least impurity, and certainly blasphemy and bad language, where God is not part of the scene. And even soaps, they're a language where God does not exist and doesn't enter into the equation. They're a forum for putting God to the side and mocking him. You can't collude by watching them passively. And then internet. It's a very useful instrument. We're actually using it at this moment in time. It's neutral, but it's massively infested too. So every time you go into YouTube or into anything which is live and plugged into reality outside, remember, demons are there waiting to come into you. With the imagination, with waste of time. And once you've seen something, you've seen it forevermore. And once the evening has been spent in addictive mode of watching, it's lost forever. The mobile phone. People can't not watch it. Can't not engage. It's all something which makes us downward bound and not with the angels. By watching what is not lasting, wasting precious time. I'll just tell you a story to conclude. It's going full circle back to where I started. The angels protect ourselves and also their king. As we saw in the readings, thousands upon thousands. St. Faustina was passing a church or churches in the train one day and saw at each consecrated church there was a bright angel posted and protecting. But they were also acknowledging and bowing before her own guardian angel as he passed. There was communication between them. Remember your guardian angel. And he can find things when you've lost them, by the way. You little people, if you lost something, pray to your guardian angel. If you lost Mammy, get your guardian angel to talk to Mammy, bring her back to me. It works perfectly well, because they've got eyes that we haven't. But anyway, one day, a close friend of mine was now died. She was a nun. She gave me the Bible I had when I made my vows, and I've still got it with her beautiful calligraphy in it. Well, she, when she was a young nun, was in a city church, receiving Holy Communion at the altar rails. And the priest, after he'd given her the sacred host, whispered in her ear, "Sister, follow that man. He's got the sacred host." The priest, fortunately, had seen he didn't actually consume it. He put it in his hand, in his pocket then. So she obeyed as soon as she received Holy Communion, and she went out pretty niftily, and he had already gone out. She ran after him. She was a young nun, so she tried as fast as she could to catch, and she caught him. She cornered him. And she was trying to get him to hand over the sacred host, and he was denying that he had it. She was insisting, and she was saying how precious it was to him, to her, and he would still not acknowledge that he had it. She tried a third time with all her means to press and to insist, but he still carried on in denial, and there was nothing more she could do short of physical action, which she couldn't as a nun. She was about to abandon the project because she could go no further. She heard a voice inside her. "Hold your ground!" And she insisted it was a strong, virile man's voice. She looked at this poor man, and he was somehow dumbfounded. He was looking not at her, but behind her. He, without more ado, pulled out the host, which by then was crushed because he'd been holding it. "Take it! Go away!" and ran off with himself. She had the host, and she noticed that he was actually going into an area where she knew that there was satanic stuff going on. And we know that these people involved in satanic rituals have to have a certain amount of consecrated hosts every month. The deadline, they have to have them, and they're disappearing all the time from our churches during Mass and from our tabernacles outside Mass. And they can't fool the authorities, the satanic authorities, by taking unconsecrated ones from the tabernacle. The demon knows it straight away, and they can't get away from it. They want to attack their king, just as they did at the original fall of the demonic forces, against which we have a great army to protect us.